Omakyana Timrandasya Jnanslakyan Saksumilitam Jinatas Mangaslavena. Kachunak Prabhu, you want to say something?
Yes, Maharaj. Hare Krishna, everybody. So, welcome to today's session on by Bhakti Prabhu Maharaj on symptoms of liberated soul. So, giving a brief introduction of Maharaj. His Holiness Bhakti Prabhu Swami Maharaj met devotees in Belgium in 1992. From 1992 up to 1996, he was active in Namahatma preaching and joined the Radhadas temple in 1996. In 2015, he was awarded Sannyasa initiation by His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj.
Recording in progress.
He has served as a secretary for the European RGB, secretary for the Global GBC body, and the secretary for the GBC Executive Committee. From 2011 to 2016, he served as a secretary for the GBC Sannyas Ministry and helped with the development of the ministry. He also served as a legal director, trustee, teacher, and a student in Bhaktivedanta College. In 2011, he shifted his home base from Leicester, UK, wherein he introduced the Bhakti Shastri course. He shifted his home base to UK, Leicester. And since 2015, Bhakti Swami is offering Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava online courses. He studied Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta at VIH in Vrindavan, earned a PhD in the study of religion at the University of Wales, and published a number of academic articles. He currently serves as a member of Sannyas Ministry and as a member of ISKCON Board of Examinations as well. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for giving us your valuable time. We want to welcome you by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namini. Namaste Saraswata Devi Gauravani Pacharani. Nirvishesha Srinavadi Paskachari Dasatana. Srila Prabhupada Ki. So today I will make a presentation on symptoms of liberated souls, on symptoms of conditioned souls, and how to go from one stage to the other. I felt inspired to develop a seminar on this subject matter after studying the 11th chapter of the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Uddhava Gita, where Lord Krishna explains to Uddhava the symptoms of conditioned and liberated living entities. In that chapter mainly he describes different characteristics of conditioned and liberated life, the symptoms by which one can recognize saintly persons, and the various processes of devotional service, regulated devotional service. And then in the 12th chapter of the 11th canto, it speaks about beyond renunciation, how to attain prema, especially Braj prema, which is attained by the association of pure devotees. And that, but of course we are all in the preaching field. And I was thinking, what are the aims of my presentation? How can it be useful for you? The first level on which this can be useful is to ascertain our own position. That could be a private exercise, seeing in our hearts to what extent have we characteristics of liberated souls or conditioned souls. A second objective, I would say, is certainly that we have heard from Prahlad Nanda Maharaj and his team all these different levels of audience, from community, crowd, congregation, committed, core. Well, the question may arise, how are we going to use these arguments and this knowledge to preach to these different levels? So I will first make a presentation, and after the presentation we will have a discussion. A discussion on which arguments or points you found most useful for preaching and why, and to which levels of audience. So first I will speak on symptoms of liberated souls. Arjuna is asking Krishna in 254, what are the symptoms of one's consciousness merged into transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? So Arjuna is asking here, what are the symptoms of these liberated souls? Of course, the first point Krishna makes, Prayati atakamam sarva partamanogatam atmanivatmanatu stastita pahyastatochate. So that this liberated person is one who has given up material desires. Because they are concoctions of the mind. And he wants to give satisfaction to the soul, his real self. The needs of the body, the needs of the soul are different. The needs of the soul is to love and to be loved. And if that propensity is directed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service, that gives full satisfaction. And Krishna says, Dukkhasanat vihmana sukashuvigatah pravitaragabayagata stitatirmani ruchyate. Yes, such a liberated person is not disturbed when there is happiness or misery. He is not happy when an opportunity for sense gratification comes. He is free from attachment, fear, anger. Also in the 14th chapter of the Gita, Arjuna asked a very similar question. Kairlingastrin gunanetan atito bhavati prabho kimacharya katam shaitam tringunan ativartate. Arjuna inquired, which are the symptoms by which one is known, who is transcendental to the three modes? What is behavior? How does he transcend the modes? And then Krishna, of course, gives the symptoms of someone who has transcended these modes. It's one who does not hate illumination or attachment, delusion, when they are present or when they appear, who is unwavering and undisturbed to all the reactions of the material qualities, is neutral, transcendental to the modes, that he knows that only these modes are active. He's situated in the self. For him, happiness and distress are the same. A lump of earth, stone, or a piece of gold with equal eye, he sees with equal eye. He is equal to the desirable or undesirable in this world. Steady in praise and blame, honor, dishonor, treats both friends and enemy equally, and is renounced all material activities. These are many qualities Krishna gives. But how does a liberated soul sees the world? That that vision is described also in Bhagavad Gita. Naiva kinst karomiti yukt mamyeta tatvavit pashans pishans pishanshihan asnangasan svapam vasam palapam vechivam hinam unmisam nimisam api indiakti suvarti vartanta itidaryam. So a person in spiritual consciousness is seeing, is hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, breathing, and so on. He knows I'm not doing anything at all. Only the material senses and their objects are engaged with each other. And that is under the control of material nature. Of course, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmana Grava Astini Sveva Svapaketcha Panada Samadashna. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision learned and gentle Brahman that a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater with equal eye. So, and who is on the path of liberation? Also the Gita explains in the 15th chapter, verse 5, Nirmama moashita sangha dosha atyatma nitya vinivita kama tvam verve mukta sukha sukha samyer gacchanta muta padanapyam tat. They are free from false prestige, no false ego, no false association. They understand what's eternal, what's temporary. They are done with lust, is freed from the duality of happiness and distress, and they surrender to the Supreme Lord. And then what are the realizations of one who is on the path of liberation? These realizations we find in the 13th chapter. These are characteristics of one who is on the path of liberation. And there, from 8 to 12, you have the 21 items of knowledge. I'm sure you know them all. But now, the first question is, yes, Vanamali Prama?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, just wanted to know whether the slides are moving because we are still in the first slide, symptoms of liberated souls.
Yeah, I gave an introduction and they will move now. Is that okay?
It's not moving. It is not yet moved.
No, I did not move any slide yet, but they will move now. Is that okay?
Yes. Thank you, Maharaj.
Sorry to disappoint you with that. So then now, the first question is, who is liberated and liberated from what? What is the definition of being liberated? A definition of liberation from the Bhagavatam. My presentation is mostly going to verses from the Uddhav Gita, but also other parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You find also in Bhagavatarka Marichi Mala from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. There the whole topics of the Bhagavatam are divided into 20 chapters. And there's also a chapter there on symptoms of conditioned souls and symptoms of liberated souls. And he refers also mostly to the 11th canto, but not only to the 11th canto. So can you think of a verse which can be said, a verse from the Bhagavatam, which states that what liberation is, a definition of liberation from the Bhagavatam? Rishi Kumar. And translation?
If one is situated in one's constitutional position, and which is the irrevocable situation that is defined as liberation.
Under this second canto, chapter 10, verse 6. Here we have it. Thank you. That was immediately to the point, Rishi Kumar. Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after it gives up the changeable gross and subtle material bodies. We have the gross elements, the gross body, earth, water, air, fire, ether, the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, false ego. So there are these 8 elements, and we are spiritual, transcendental. Interesting is that, well, Pran Govinda, you want to say something, but we got the answer already, but maybe there is another definition in the Bhagavatam we are not aware of. We don't hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes?
Okay. Maharaj, the definition Muktirhitta Annatha Rupam, that's ultimately, but Prabhupada also mentioned from the Chandogya Upanishad in Bhagavatam 5.4.5, I always remember that verse, there are 8 symptoms. Atma apahta papna vijaro vimittu vishokha vijokashu. Apipasu satta kama satta sankalpa satta. If you look at in the purport of Prabhupada's 5.4.5, he gives this that this is the liberated soul's natural condition. 8 symptoms.
Yeah, those are the symptoms. But 2.10.6 really points to what it really is. We must get rid of the subtle body. The subtle body is coming with us since time immemorial. Originally in the spiritual world, we had a spiritual body. But somewhere or another, we wanted to, we were a little curious, what would it be to be Krishna, to be the enjoyer. And we wanted to have the experience, but you cannot have it with this material body. I'm sorry, you cannot have that experience with a spiritual body. A spiritual body can only be used for serving Krishna. And therefore Krishna has given us a gross and a subtle body. And the subtle body is a cause of the gross body. So liberation is getting rid from the subtle body. You have to kill the subtle body. How do we kill the subtle body? By spiritualizing the subtle body. 3 components: mind, intelligence, false ego. We spiritualize the mind by thinking of Krishna. We spiritualize the intelligence by transcendental knowledge. By that, the intelligence will engage the mind and the sense in devotion service. We will become purified. Then the false ego will disappear. And then the spiritual body, the material subtle body will be spiritualized, and thus the death of the material subtle body. So that's the problem. So now, what is the experience of one who is realized? We find in the first canto, 1.3.33. Whenever a person experienced by self-realization that the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as the Lord. In the beginning of chapter 11 from the 11th canto, Krishna says something very wonderful, because Uddhav is asking, so tell me about why is the soul, when is the soul in a conditioned state, when it is conditioned, and when it is liberated. Tell me about the liberated stage and conditioned state of the soul. And Krishna answers, the soul is never liberated, it's never conditioned. That has nothing to do with the material energy. So that's interesting. We think we are liberated because we identify with the body. But we are the pure self. It's nothing to do with the body. And here Lord Krishna gives examples. Although the sky or space is the resting place of everything, the sky does not mix with anything, nor is it entangled. The sun is not at all attached to water in which it is reflected within innumerable reservoirs, and the mighty wind blowing everywhere is not affected by innumerable aromas and atmospheres through which it passes. In the same way, a self-realized soul is completely detached from the material body and the material world around it. It is like a person who has awakened and arisen from a dream. So here we see different examples. The sky does not become entangled with anything. It does not mix with anything. The sun is not attached to the water in which it is reflected. The wind blowing is not affected by aromas. It's like a realized person, a liberated person is like someone arisen from a dream. We dream at night, we get up and we think, oh, it's just a dream. Right? But self-realized soul sees this life of the body starts with the birth and ends with death. And it's a dream. Because when we dream at night and we get up, we say, oh, it was a temporary imagination of the mind. And self-realized soul says, oh, this life of the body is a temporary imagination of the soul identifying with the body. It's illusory because it's temporary. It's like a person who gets up from a dream. So the sun is not attached to the water in which it is reflected. See here, your person wakes up from a dream. Then said, a person is considered liberated from the gross and subtle material bodies when all the functions, vital energy, senses, mind and intelligence are performed without material desires. Such a person, although situated within the body, is not entangled. So the key is there, material desire. So we imagine that we are this body, and that's the problem. It's like entering into a cinema hall, and you become attached to the personalities of the screen, sometimes happiness, sometimes distress. But on the screen is only some light going. We are not, we identify with the film, and therefore, yes, we suffer because we identify with the body. So, just Pran Govinda, best that I first make my presentation, because otherwise I will only be able to give you a big part of my presentation. I think there are many important points to come, and we can have the discussion at the end, like I said in the beginning. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so let me first go to the presentation, then we will discuss that. So, equally honor and distress, tolerate insults. These are these qualities we have heard. That this, but now we have here Prabhupada. Prabhupada was on a Liberated platform, that, and we can learn from him. First, I want to tell you a few pastimes, Srila Prabhupada, in which he used anger. That anger in the service of Krishna. This was in 1972 in Amsterdam. There is this installation of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. Srila Prabhupada arrived there, but all the devotees were neophytes. Even the day before, that the deities had no dresses. So during the night, Bhakti Gauravani Maharaj, now he was trying to make some dresses, he never did it before. And the next day there was nothing prepared for the initiation. And when Srila Prabhupada came there and said, where are the fruits, where are the paraphernalia for bathing and so on? And they put some old cooking pots there, and Srila Prabhupada became angry. Do you want to bathe the deities in that? And he was chastising the devotees very angrily. And the Dutch television was there, that was filming everything. Yes, but Srila Prabhupada didn't care for it. He became very angry and he was chastising, and the devotees were really affected, were shivering, felt fear, and were running here and there to make the arrangements. But yeah, after the ceremony was over, with many difficulties during that ceremony, that he was very peaceful, sitting in a rocking chair, like nothing happened. At another instant, there was Navyogendra Maharaj. This is in Mayapur. This is Srila Prabhupada's quarters, the Lotus building. The first building was just finished, the Lotus building. And at that time we had already guards, and there was a Bengali guard who had to be at a certain point at a certain time, a security guard. And when Srila Prabhupada came before his room, the guard had to be there. He looked at his watch and he looked, this guard should be here. Get me this guard. And when a Bengali guard came into his room, Navyogendra Maharaj was there. He was not a Swami at the time, but Srila Prabhupada started to shout very angrily in Bengali to the security guard, and Navyogendra Maharaj said, I was shivering from fear, so heavy. But when the guard went out, Srila Prabhupada became very, very peaceful. Of course, we know Srila Prabhupada, he was commenting on Brahma Mohan Lila, at the time of his deathbed, he was hearing, he was commentating. We see Advaita Maharaj holding the mic, and we find his commentaries today in the Bhagavatam so crystal clear that this is a liberated soul. Also, in August, in the summer 1977, Srila Prabhupada became very sick. He was in Vrindavan. But then at the end of August, he became better. And then he wanted to go to America. And he took a flight to the Bhaktivedanta Manor. But there he fell sick again. And yeah, you can see there are videos, films where Srila Prabhupada is brought down in a palanquin from his room with big glasses. But mostly he was lying in bed. And when the devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, "Are you suffering?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "I don't feel anything." So these are all symptoms of liberated souls, one who is awakened from a dream. So give up the dream. We are not this body, we are transcendental to the body, just as one who has arisen from a dream gives up the dream body. So it means that the liberated soul lives without material attachments. So is not controlled by the senses, is not controlled by anger, fear, and so on, is not entangled in anything, is equal, sees with equal vision, fixed in detachment in all circumstances. It sees the life of the body as a dream. But the foremost quality of a liberated soul is that he always hears and remembers and speaks about Krishna. The gopis' mind could not be diverted, not even for the blinking of an eye, from Krishna. They are always speaking about Krishna, reading the Bhagavatam, engaging themselves in the Krishna Katha. Now, I want to go to the opposite, the conditioned souls. I have another slideshow of I will share it with you. Conditioned souls. Yeah, we can say conditioned souls. It's just the opposite of liberated souls, but what are really the symptoms of being conditioned? First, we have to become conscious what it means to be conditioned. So, the first devotee I ever met was Mahavishnu Goswami. Mahavishnu Goswami was from Gujarat. He was originally he was living in London. He took sannyas at the end of the 80s, and then he started traveling preaching, and he came to Belgium. And he was the first devotee that I met. I never met really devotees before. Because I was an accountant, a chartered accountant. I got an invitation some way or another from that lecture, for his lecture, and I went to the meeting, and it was in a home of a Grihastha. And I was ringing at the door, and someone opened the door. I asked, is the lecture here? They said, yes. And he showed, you can go into the living. So I was going to the living, and there I saw this Swami. I'd never seen a Swami before. He looked at me and I said, oh, maybe you can leave your shoes outside. So I went outside and came in. And then I had a very strange experience. I saw this devotee sitting there. I never saw a devotee. They were dressed in bed sheets with some hair at the back of their head. I was thinking, this is very strange. My mind said, this is strange. And then they started to chant all these mantras. And my mind said, maybe you should go out. This is too strange. There were deities, but I didn't see the deities because that was not in the framework of my existence. Never heard of what deities would be. But somewhere or other I stayed, and then this Swami started to speak on this verse, the movements of the living entity, third canto. And he gave a lecture on this verse. And after hearing, I understood I'm in difficulty. I understood somewhat what conditioned means. And the day after, I started to chant Hare Krishna. I went straight to chanting 12 rounds and then 16 rounds. So that's the power of the Bhagavatam. It makes us aware about what is the cause of our difficulty, the conditioned state. The conditioned state which starts from forgetting Krishna. So there are 5 causes of being conditioned. The first is tamas, one forgets Krishna. If one forgets Krishna, then one forgets oneself and think, I'm the enjoyer, which is moha, illusion. And then we think, oh, this is mine, that's for my enjoyment, I want this. That's called Mahamaya. And then because of that sense of possessiveness, we start to suffer, tamishra, because things change in this world. But we are attached to make disappear of change. And then under tamishra, finally, we come to the point of thinking I'm going to die. So and that's under tamishra. So 5 causes of being conditioned. The first is tamas, moha, mahamoha, tamishra, under tamishra. These 5 causes are explained in the 2nd canto, where Brahma, in the 3rd canto, around chapter 10, I think, there Brahma, before starting his Visarga, he creates these 5 layers of illusion. So once Srila Prabhupada was walking, and he saw with the devotees in a park, somewhere in America, and he saw eyes on the path. And he was taking his cane, and he started breaking the ice with his cane, and the devotees said, well, Prabhupada, what are you doing? And Prabhupada said, this is not the natural state of the ice. So this life of the body is not a natural state of the soul, because here, I and mine, that I and mine, that is signs of being conditioned, that and that is caused by the influence of false ego. We think ourselves the enjoyer and the proprietor, and by these tendencies we are going from one body to another in so many species that we see in history. Of course, many examples of this conditioned state. Conditioned state makes us build sand castles that child makes, or the beach makes a sand castle. Then the sea comes and destroys it. And that's all what we get in material existence. When Akrura was sent by Lord Krishna to Hastinapur, when he heard that the Pandavas were in difficulty, then, yes, Akrura went to speak with Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra and Akrura gave him very good advice. He said, give out this envy to the Pandavas. Give them give them their share of their inheritance. That, anyways, Akrura made so many points, and Dhritarashtra replied, yes, that's all good advice that you give. It's like hearing the nectar of the gods. But unfortunately, it cannot stay in my heart. It's going to my heart like a lightning goes to a cloud. That because of attachment to my sons. So they are all attached to the temporary. All this history of mankind, it has not much value. We see here Alexander the Great. He was 32, conquered half of the world, but he had to go, and they dying in great grief, all the illusion of the body. So, the conditioned soul is engagement for temporary fruits. You have here on the screen, yes, that is the prayer of Dhruva Maharaj. Foolish persons are after benedictions for sense gratification. The dog and these people dining in a restaurant, they are interesting in eating from the same bone. It's all temporary fruits. So this is the conditioned state that and now the last point of my presentation is how to go from the conditioned state to the liberated state. So, things to do. These are a number of points which are important. Some are related to the regulate devotional service, that other points are also very important for our preaching. First is association of devotees. That so by engaging in your transcendental loving service in the association of devotees who are liberated souls, I shall become completely uncontaminated by the association of the three modes and be able to chant the glories of your Lordship, who are so dear to me. So in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, chapter 11 and 12, Lord Krishna explains first regulated devotional service. And he mentions so many points there, and we do all these points. We do, that's our practice in ISKCON, what he mentions there. Worship of the deity, fasting on Ekadashi, then celebrating Janmashtami, and then all the deity worship, chanting the holy names. Krishna mentioned it all in the Uddhav Gita, and that's regulated devotional service. But in the next chapter, he says this regulated devotional service will purify you. But to learn or to develop love for Krishna, in the next chapter, which is entitled Beyond Renunciation, to develop this prema, this love, you must associate with my pure devotees, he says. And that's mentioned here, association of devotees. Then absorbing Krishna's pastime. Engage constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is a second very important practice. And then pray for the association of devotees. So that's important, that we become attached to the association of devotees. I remember the beginning of the 90s. At that time I was still married, but I was chanting and practicing. But I was with my family on vacation in the Black Forest in Germany. But each morning I was getting up early, making a walk in the forest, chanting my rounds and so on. Then after 2 weeks I did not have association of devotees. I was in the middle of the city, Freiburg im Breisgau, and I was chanting my rounds in the morning, and I was praying to Krishna, please give me the association of devotees, please, please. And just when I finished my 16 rounds, a devotee was standing for me, a book distributor, and we had a very nice talk. So Krishna reciprocates with us if we really want the association of advanced devotees. He will bring us in contact. That. Another point is very important, never find faults with others. If we enter the duality of desire and hate, attachment and aversion, that is a blockage on our path to become liberated. And Krishna explains that in 334 in Bhagavad Gita and in 7:26-27 in Bhagavad Gita. So engage in constant hearing about Krishna. That's Srimad Bhagavatam 4:29-40. My dear King, in the place where pure devotees following the rules and regulations and thus purely conscious engage with great eagerness in hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in that place, if one gets a chance to hear their constant flow of nectar, which is exactly like the waves of a river, one will forget the necessities of life, namely hunger and thirst, and become free from all kinds of lamentation, fear, lamentation, and illusion. And then follow the Mahatmas. That they have developed love for Krishna. They can show us the path to the teachings of the Guru Parampara. Another point is to become liberated, be satisfied with whatever one achieves. Sometimes we devotees think, if I change my situation, I'm going to become more happy and satisfied. But mostly that doesn't happen because we have to get our karma. What's our karma in the future? Mostly we look back, especially if you are older, then you see what your karma was in the past. It will be your karma in the future in this life. Of course, our karma for future lives may be eradicated, but the prarabdha karma is running out. And that's not going away. Tashevaita prayateta kovto nalapyate atpamtam yaparatata lapyate sikapam anyatuskan kalnina sarvata gabira brahmasa. So one should seek for this higher happiness and not try to get happiness from this world. This happiness and distress comes on his own accord. So changing our situation to become materially happy in this world will not happen. So the question is, you are in a certain situation according to your previous karma. There's a law of karma. There's an arrangement by Krishna, and accept it. Accept it. This is an arrangement by Krishna. I accept the happiness and distress that I have, and I will do my best to engage in devotional service and go beyond that. So be satisfied. There's also in the Bhagavad Gita that austerity of the mind is being satisfied, feeling satisfied in any condition. Then to advance to the liberated states, it's important to understand that everything in this world is temporary. Don't take all what's happening in this life too serious. This happiness and distress is honor, this dishonor. It's all fleeting. It's going. Those who dishonored you, I see 50 years ago, those who dishonored me 50 years ago, they are dead, gone. It's all. What's the point, huh? So we die one day, and everyone dies in this world. And forgive. Tatenu kampamsa mikshma bunjati evatna ketam viparamrit vakvapubir vidodamstu ichveti mukti vadevya. Forgive that, and that is, the standard of Vaishnava behavior. That don't see this devotee is doing that to me, I will retaliate. No. Accept it is my fault. He's the instrument to bring me my reaction. And it's good, because then I learn to be humble. And finally, do not waste time. Use every moment in your life to make spiritual advancement. Discriminate because between what is essential and what is not essential. What is essential connects us with the eternal, and that's devotional service. Now I have a last set of points that I want to make. let's see if I can put it on the screen. And that's a regulated devotional service, or sadhana. So that sadhana is very important. That we should always remember, uncontrolled mind and senses, that is the cause of so many problems. You see this little guy here that eaten too much. that yes. If a human being is attached to fruitive activities, whatever his mind does with the help of his senses takes him from one planet to another. Although the spirit soul is distinct from the mind, he proudly identifies with the mind and thus follows it. So, my dear Uddhav, fixing your intelligence on me, you should thus completely control the mind. This is the essence of the science of yoga. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one who studies this sacred dialogue, he will, he is, worshipping me with his intelligence. So this is the Uddhav Gita. Even though neglected, insulted, ridiculed, or envied by bad men, or even though repeatedly agitated by being beaten, tied up, or deprived of one's occupation, spat upon, or polluted with urine by ignorant people, one who desires the highest goal in life in spite of all these difficulties, uses intelligence to keep himself on the spiritual platform. Use of our intelligence. That, of course, these are the 3 points that Mahavishnu Goswami, he said in that first meeting. I always remember it, that you do SSI and you get rid of LIF, submission, service, inquiry. Dat Vinapanapadna Pariprasna Sevjan Upadeksanti Teganam Jnanina Tattva Darshinaha. And then, if you do that, SSI, then he said, you get rid of LIF, lamentation, illusion, and fear will go. And that lamentation, illusion, and fear especially will go when we take shelter of the Bhagavatam. The 177 Bhagavatam, when we give oral reception to this Bhagavatam, that then this lamentation, illusion, and fear will go. That and give up false ego. That for him who constantly meditates upon my presence within all persons, the bad tendencies of rivalry, envy, and abusiveness, along with false ego, will be very quickly destroyed. This means we chant, we hear about Krishna, we cleanse the mirror of the heart. That, yes. Even if one chants the Hare Krishna mantra offensively, one can avoid offenses by continuous chanting without deviation. One will become accustomed to this practice, will always remain in a pure transcendental position, untouchable by sinful reactions. So many things we can do. Deity worship, temple construction, Janmasti, cleaning the temple. So these are some items of regulated devotional service. What is this regulated devotional service? I will read a few verses to end from the Uddhav Gita, where Krishna speaks about this regulated devotional service. He says, "My dear Uddhav, one can give up false pride and prestige by engaging in the following devotional activities. One may purify oneself by seeing, touching, worshipping, serving, offering prayers of glorification and obeisance to my form as the deity and to my pure devotees. One should also glorify my transcendental activities here with love and faith and narrations of my glories and constantly meditate on me. One should offer to me whatever one acquires and accepting oneself as my eternal servant. One should give oneself completely to me. One should always discuss my birth and activities and enjoy life, participating festivals such as Janmashtami. In my temple, one should also participate in festivals and ceremonies by singing, dancing, playing musical instruments, and discussing me with other Vaishnavas. One should observe all the regularly celebrated annual festivals by attending ceremonies, pilgrimages, and making offerings. One should also observe religious vows, such as Ekadashi, and take initiation by the procedures mentioned in the Vedas. One should faithfully and lovingly support the installation of my deity, and individually or in cooperation with others, one should work for the construction of Krishna-conscious temples, cities, as well as flower gardens, fruit gardens, and special areas to celebrate my pastimes. One should consider oneself my humble servant without duplicity, and thus should help to clean the temple, which is my home. First, one should sweep and dust thoroughly, and then one should further cleanse with water and cauldron. Having dried the temple, one should sprinkle scented water and decorate the temple with mandalas. One should just act like my servant. A devotee should never advertise his devotional activities. Therefore, his service will not be the cause of false pride. One should never use lamps that are offered for me for other purposes simply because there is need of illumination. And similarly, one should never offer me anything that has been offered or used by others. Whatever is most desired by one within this material world, and whatever is most dear to oneself, one should offer that very thing to me. Such an offering qualifies one for eternal life. These are the words of Lord Krishna about regulated devotional service in the Uddhav Gita. So I made this presentation to give you an idea to what's a liberated person, what's a conditioned state, how to go from one to another. Now my question to you is, and I would like you all to concentrate on this point, that you heard many things. First, what is most useful for you for preaching? What can you use for preaching? And for which audiences do you find the arguments that are most useful for preaching? For which audience they are, they can be used, or they would be most effective. So, please, let's have a discussion. Yes, Sutta Papa, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for this presentation. It was very enlightening. I'll kind of reflect a little bit on just your question that you've asked, and then, if possible, maybe I have a query also. In terms of which audiences we could use this for, what occurred to me is I think what you've presented can be definitely, obviously, relevant for the devotee audience. You know, devotees who have been practicing for some time, but who may still very much be identifying and still in a very conditioned state of mind. So being able to outline the characteristics helps them to do that introspection in terms of how much they're actually becoming detached and really identifying on a spiritual level. So, but then I was also thinking, Maharaj, that what you've presented is so universal actually in terms of what people are looking for in the world. Like young people nowadays and just people in the world generally, like freedom is such a big consideration on their mind, how to live free from limitation or entanglements. And so bringing in this philosophy of the Bhagavatam of how to transcend the body and the mind can also be a very attractive presentation for them, showing them how to live in the world in a more free state of mind. So I was thinking it could also be used as an outreach tool as well, if the language is just maybe adjusted a little bit to relate to them. So this was just a reflection I had, Marge. I don't know if you want to respond to that. I just also have a question.
Yeah, I think certainly the points that I find very important what you made is it's like universal knowledge. It's scientific, but it has to be presented in a language that people today can understand and relate to. And that is many times a challenge. The points that I made, was a presentation for all of you. This is not a presentation that I would make even for the general audience of devotees. That is specific to help us all to get some tools for and arguments and points for presenting it to the outside world. Because but then to present it according to the audience in a scientific way, it starts always with, if you address, like, I give an example, the community. They don't know anything about Krishna. So the first thing we need to explain is we are not his body, and we are the consciousness in the body. That's a symptom of who we are, consciousness, and the source of consciousness. That is still a big question mark for the so-called scientists today. They try to find some origin in matter, but it doesn't go. So, and that's the point where it becomes scientific, and and then you can connect with that the needs of the body, needs of the soul, and then show in a practical way how we really want to fulfill the needs of the soul, but we are searching it in matter. And when they understand these basics, then we can use some of these arguments, maybe. So that was my reflection on that. Thank you for your contribution, Sutta Papa.
Could I ask a question, Mark? Is that possible?
Yes, sure.
Maharaj, so you gave this very beautiful definition from the Bhagavatam about how liberation comes after the living entity gives up the changeable, gross and subtle material bodies, the identification. So I was thinking, Maharaj, that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna first begins by explaining to Arjuna that he's not the body, that he's the soul, that he's separate from these temporary identifications. But then I was thinking it's very interesting in the Gita that Krishna, he uses different ways to address Arjuna. Like he talks to him, he addresses him as the best of the Bharatas, or the supreme archer, the winner of wealth. And it's almost as though Krishna has told Arjuna that he's not any of these identities. But then later on, Krishna uses those identities to inspire Arjuna to fight in the war. So on one hand, he's trying to tell him that he's beyond it, and then in another hand, it seems like he reinforces those identities to then inspire him to do something. So I'm just wondering, Maharaj, whether in our attempts to become free from all our identities of this world, is there sometimes a case for using those identities and utilizing the temporary kind of things that we have to inspire ourselves to ultimately go beyond it? Because I'm just wondering, it's interesting that Krishna uses seemingly bodily identities after he's told Arjuna that he's not the body.
Yeah. So Lord Krishna is a master in Yukta Vairagya, so of using all these identities, because Arjuna is a Kshatriya, he's a fighter, and that's an identity. That's a false identity. But by using it in Krishna's service, it becomes transcendental. And he's born in this great lineage and so on, and that's part of this false, this situation of false ego, we may say, but at the same time, it's also a sign of Krishna is empowering him to do this service. He gives this power, he gives this lineage, he gives this, so because Krishna created Varnashram also, and and Varnashram, Haritoshanam, we should use it in Krishna's service, and so it's not condemning this bodily situation, but Krishna advises us, you use it in the service. And he used all our arguments to get him to fight, but in that mood of Yukta Vairagya. Because otherwise, if we don't get that point, we get into attachment and aversion, and that's a problem. So it's that. Anyway, that's what I could say, Sutta Prabhu. Does that make sense?
Very useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Adoksaya Prabhu, please.
Дорогой Махарадж, пожалуйста, примите мои смиренные поклоны. Спасибо огромное за полезную презентацию.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances and thank you very much for this presentation, which is very useful.
Сегодня говорилось о признаках освобожденной души, так же как и было дано определение освобожденной души.
So today you were speaking about the symptoms of a liberated soul, and the definition of liberation was given.
Мне хотелось отметить с этим один момент.
And regarding this, I want to make one point.
Шрила Шримад Бхагаватам приводит цитату Вирарахавачари, который упоминает цитату из Чхандогья Упанишада, где описывается 8 признаков освобождения.
So Srila Prabhupada, in one of the purports of Srimad Bhagavatam, he quotes Chandogya Upanishad, and Viraragava was also quoting this Chandogya Upanishad, and in this Chandogya Upanishad, 8 symptoms of liberated soul are mentioned. Дальше.
В общем-то, весь этот список с признаками кама-санкалпа, то есть все желания направлены к преданным на Кришну, и все желания также исполняются, сати-санкалпа.
So these symptoms are kama sankalpa and satya sankalpa. It means that he has no desires except desires that are meant for Krishna's satisfaction. And the next point is that these desires are fulfilled, seems to be by Krishna's arrangement.
Но начинается это описание апахата папа, то есть того, что преданный...
Доктору Прабhu, микрофон в зуме включен, пусть будет, а в телеграме его не надо включать. Ладно? Давайте в зуме, а то не слышно, что вы говорите. А в телеграме не надо его включать. Сможете?
Вот сейчас меня слышно было?
Да, сейчас все в порядке. Давайте повторите, пожалуйста, еще разочек.
Да, начинается этот список с апахата папа, то, что преданный перестает грешить.
But this list begins from apahata. It means that devotee becomes free from the tendency to commit sinful activities.
И я хотел сказать о том, что, наверное, наиболее важным моментом для того, чтобы понять, является человек освобожденным или нет, потому что он может проявлять признаки освобожденной души, но еще сохранять полным греховным поступком.
So I think that apapahata is the main point because personality can manifest some symptoms of a liberated soul, but the main point is that is he free from this tendency to commit sinful activities or not? So I would like you, Maharaj, to elaborate on this topic.
Well, first, there is different understandings of liberation, but the ultimate liberation is only attained when we attain prema, love for God. Because real liberation means going back to the spiritual world. If we are not going back to the spiritual world, then that is only, whatever you achieve is temporary. You can merge with Brahman or whatever, but it's temporary. It will not be permanent. We must develop this love of God. So there is also the liberation attained, so-called, by the impersonalist, but it's not real liberation. Srila Prabhupada quotes many times this verse from the 10th canto, Yenierim vindaksim vimuktamaninas, vastabaya avisuda buddhaya, aruya kachena prampadam pada, patantyodnatitiyusma angraya. So they think vimuktamaninas that they are liberated, but there is still some subtle problem, some anartha in their heart. And they are it's very difficult to attain their circled position of liberation, but finally they have to come down again. They fall down from their imagined position. So becoming free from this tendency for sinful activities is a very important step for liberation, because then one will quickly come to Prashanatma, that Brahmabhuta Prashanatma, the spiritual platform. But that's only the beginning of the spiritual platform, to be liberated, to realize I'm not this body, to give up these sinful inclinations. It's just the beginning. Then spiritual life begins. Then the subtle work, the subtle anarthas are still there. So it takes still some time. So there are different ideas of liberation, but the real idea of liberation is the going back to Godhead, to the spiritual world. And that's real liberation. And giving up sinful activities is the first small step towards that, for coming to Nishta. Does that help, Adoxia?
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you. So, Pran Govinda program, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances all glories to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Prabhupada.
It's truly a beautiful presentation, Maharaj. I like that a lot. I was going to, I really appreciate your view on Sutava Prabhu's identity, not crisis only, identity, proper identity definition. What I understood also, because you added to my understanding a nice view, I like that. I always thought that when Krishna was not speaking so much on the first chapter until 2.7 Arjuna surrender. So Arjuna's entire problem was from his functional identity. But then Krishna escaped from, not escaped, he stepped out of it. He says, you need to focus on fundamental identity, that you are servant of the servant of me. And so at the conclusion, what I understood, that fundamental identity should be always above functional identity. Functional identity is like you are a Kshatriya, you have to protect the innocent from the aggressor. Yes, those are there, but those are, and he used it, as you mentioned. But fundamental identity, that for my pleasure you're doing it, should be above. That's what I think sannyas candidate, as a sannyas candidate, I should be always thinking. Otherwise, psychophysical nature is going to disturb always, as long as it is under the. Otherwise, sannyas ashram is also functional identity, it's not a fundamental identity. Maharaj, I just had my question was, in the beginning you mentioned about the liberated. It was very nice 4 steps you gave. So there you mentioned that the liberated soul should be kind of a, what I understood from 6.8 in Bhagavad Gita, that equal vision. Equal vision, for me, I understood from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur commentary, the materialist maybe see the gold is valuable and stone doesn't have any value. But the Jnani Yogi, they see nothing has value. Everything is useless in the material world, in reference to the matter. But the devotee's perspective, whatever can be used in Krishna's service, devotee values. So I always think of Prabhupada's valuing the cement in Krishna Balaram temple construction. Even though he is a sannyasi, Mahabhagavat, liberated, but he was giving so much importance to Suruvi Maharaj and other about the cement, because there was a crisis, as if it is like a bag of gold. Is that proper, Maharaj? Is that okay?
Yeah, so this is the position of a devotee, Yukta Vairagya, There is a material and a spiritual dimension. The material dimension is that I'm indifferent to it. I'm not attached to it, I'm not averse to it, indifferent. And the spiritual side is, it's Krishna's property, and if it's under my care and I can use it in Krishna, great. I will use it in Krishna's service. So that's the spiritual perspective. On the other point you made, I was thinking of sadhana city, Svarup city. That's for the advanced. That's the externally. We do our work, but internally we think ourselves as a servant of Krishna. In humility we are serving, we are offering with love internally. So these are two aspects. We perform devotional service. Bhakti is a Sanskrit word, but Srila Prabhupada translated it devotional and service. It's going together. It's not just service externally. No, it's devotion. Internally we offer it to Krishna. And I think that's important for all of us, that we not remain on the external platform alone, but that we internally we are developing love, devotion, and do it without affection for Krishna. So these are the comments I could make.
Very good, Maharaj. Very well taken. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your contribution. Okay, let's hear maybe the last one. Rishi Kumar, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. If you permit, I want to just give 2-3 points which you had asked us to contribute on, which is with regard to the purpose-driven yatra in dealing with the audiences. How could some of these come in relevant? I was trying to place in consonance with, say, a level of at both, not just both congregation, committed, and core at these levels, because the devotees are already coming into, the practitioners are coming to a certain level of devotion already. I think the preacher, whether it is a sannyas candidate or otherwise, has to be very cautious in terms of never finding fault and always glorifying the devotees, because it's important for them to be gainfully engaged, and for that it is imperative that they feel encouraged. So maybe finding out very good feedback mechanisms to ensure that they go from one level to another. This is one thought I had. And when you're especially dealing with slightly down the line, the metrics, so to say, the community, the crowd, and the congregation, it's very important that the preacher keeps in mind the quality of forgiveness, because he has to learn to forgive, because they will probably not be up to pace in terms of the transition, and they will also be sometimes acting in a manner that may disturb the yatra also, but still one may need to forgive them and still help them transition to the next phase. So, but at all levels, the preacher has to ensure very regulated devotional service and a very strong sadhana in dealing with all of them to set an example. So these are some thoughts that came to my mind, Maharaj. I presume if they are in consonance with what Your Holiness expected us to think on.
Yeah, thank you for giving this points, this feedback. I think the presentation I made, the straightforward points are maybe better for congregation committed. But then we need to translate them in a more simple way and according to the audience, for the community and for the crowd, and that requires a lot of thought. Because if someone who has never heard of Krishna and you start to quote verses, that will not much say to them. We must understand their needs and so on. But there are certain elements in this presentation that we can translate to their level, and that need is important. And it's not easy if you can do it, you are a successful preacher. But I'm doing that for 30 years, preaching to different audiences, and it's a challenge, especially when it's a mixed audience, and you make errors. And it's okay to make faults, but we have to recognize them and learn from them. Thank you, Rishi Kumar.
Maharaj, if your holiness permits, I had a question also, which was that we had, when we discussed about Tasya Veheto Praitata Kovido, to not consciously try for happiness.
Yeah.
My question is, to what extent can one try to find mitigation for one's pains or problems of any type, as a sadhaka and as a preacher, without coming across as being overtly attached?
Yeah.
Where is the balance?
First, I would say there are two important points I always feel here. First, there is, if one is too disturbed, one can try to make a situation to make it more peaceful. Then especially the principle is there, simplify your life. Simple living, high thinking, and that may help. But we try our best. We may not be successful in it, but we try our best. But at the same time, it's important to be very nicely engaged in sadhana so that we are sufficiently absorbed in hearing about Krishna and associating with devotees, because that will give us the strength to if we have nice rounds and we heard and we worship the deity in the morning, that gives us a spiritual strength to understand what's important, what's not important, and give us the strength to do what's really essential, and not to engage in activities that will degrade us. So these two things go hand in hand always. We try our best to create a peaceful situation, that's peaceful as possible, but it's understanding at the same time it's not possible in this world. Will be always disturbance, but we try our best. And at the same time, we good fixed sadhana, regulated devotional service, as Lord Krishna describes in all these points he made. Does that help? Good. So, thank you very much. I was happy to be with you. That I hope this was useful. That you can hear the recording later again if you want to hear all the points. And hopefully in the future I can be again at your service. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada.
Srila Bhakti Prabhupada Swami Maharaj ki.
Hare Bol.